tools on disaster management, which are GIS and environmental sciences, we are moving towards law. And while we move towards law, we, as the nature of law is, we we uh, encompass the whole society into its fold. And so the task of disaster management is definitely becoming very deep and very interactive in all spheres of social sciences. This is the fundamental of our foundation course. And the five pillars which Gorika has just mentioned, I'll just specify them, that this is going to be the learning process, uh, and with great ground level learning that we have given to ourselves to reach out to this stage, that we are able to disseminate and share what we have learned today. Is, the first thing that we've seen is that in disaster management we start from a public trust doctrine, which is that the state is a trustee of everything around us, especially the resources. We we will we'll, we'll deeply go into it as we go into special sessions. From the public trust doctrine, we come to the principle of subsidiarity, that what the state should handle and what it should leave out to others. So much is to be left out to the ground level agencies, to the social sector working with people, to the community interactiveness. And that is the principle of subsidiarity we have been discussing very little in disaster management. The third is the issue that comes from environmental sciences, which is carrying capacity. In all the five sessions, we'll have some bit of carrying capacity, that the overload that this planet Earth is suffering for us, and how do we deal with it, how the law, the society is going to deal with it. And then the fourth is the embedded concept of transdisciplinarity. We have been missing out because it is nobody's fair. If today we sit here and we say that disaster management is an ideal sphere into a particular field of sciences, is no, because transdisciplinarity means we need everyone to come in and participate and share their intellectual learning with us. And the last, but a very important, very, very high sounding thing, and we have the scholars for that for tomorrow: international humanitarian law. And this international humanitarian law is going to bring the regions together, the states, the big, the small, the rogues, the gentle, the fighting ones, and the pleasant ones. They're all going to be together, because disaster does not see boundaries. It will come to all. So that's what we, if the nature doesn't respect the boundaries, then we also have to move ahead and respect the togetherness that nature brings to us. This is a fundamental thing that we learn in disaster management. Then we have certain extended learning which will take place in the kind of research that we handle. It's going to be in vivo research or in vitro research, which is extremely important and is always missed out when we discuss disaster management, because the mega empire of science, especially GIS and environmental sciences and remote sensing, they kind of occupy a larger space in disaster management, even though they are just merely tools in it. And so, in vivo and in vitro research that we do, then regional imperatives are extremely important. That how the South Asians need to come together. Let the governments do what they wish to do. Let the people do what is imperative for survival of the future. So that's where we need to come together. Hand holding is an important thing in disaster management, how we learn and move forward with it. Then the institutional networking is again an unavoidable thing in disaster management. And institutional networking just doesn't come out of the constitution that we have in each of our countries, but it also is a great freedom that need to come to the social sector, so that they decide how the institutions are going to relate to each other, considering their specific environment, the specific ecology, and the culture in which they grow. And the last of all is that the science that has to help us out in doing all this as a very important tool. Is a life and death of all this that we need to carry out. The databases, the information and communication technology, supported by adequate uh, early warning systems supplied with artificial intelligence and machine learning processes which are taking place. If we have the right application of the machine learning processes, all this that we are talking about is definitely going to grow broader and broader in a field that they turn out to very soon we come out to be with very definite strategic principles, foundation of disaster management. And like any other discipline, economics, political science, or sociology, like that, we may grow this discipline into a great academic enterprise, giving employment to hundreds of them, and also saving lives of thousands and lakhs of people around us. So, with this little introduction of what we are going to do in the next 5 days, I go back to Gorika. We have some very eminent. Finau is on the other side, a great person, uh, very happy and very interactive. So we're looking forward to listen to her. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Singh, for giving a kaleidoscopic view of what we'll be doing in these coming 5 days. Now, without wasting much time, we have the chief speaker for today's program, who has been the lighthouse in disaster law, and we are really very grateful to her for accepting our invitation, besides a very busy schedule, and she's with us here today. Before I invite her to please speak, let me just give a brief introduction of her. Finau Hifanga Leveni is the Regional Disaster Law Coordinator for the IFRC Asia Pacific Regional Office and is based in Bangkok. Finau is an international lawyer by trade and a former senior diplomat for the Kingdom of Tonga. She holds qualification in law and diplomacy from Victoria University, Hong Kong University, and Oxford University. She first joined the IFRC in 2012 as the Regional Humanitarian Diplomacy and Disaster Law Delegate based in the IFRC SUA office, and has been fortunate to witness disaster law in action via multiple emergency response deployments to disaster-affected countries to support logistics, coordination, and humanitarian diplomacy efforts. As part of her role in the Asia-Pacific region, Finau is responsible for leading the disaster law program, a large part of which focuses on legal preparedness for multi-hazards, particularly in the area of climate resilience and public health emergencies. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me? Is my volume okay?
Yeah, absolutely clear, loud and clear.
Wonderful, wonderful. Esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, namaste, malolele, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to those of you who are tuning in from your respective corners of the globe. It's really a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the very warm introduction. I have to say I'm delighted to have been invited to be a part of such an important occasion to deliver an inaugural address for the commencement of this course. And I really would like to thank Professor Amita Singh and the Network of Asia Pacific Schools and Institutes of Public Administration and Governance Disaster Research Group, or the NDRG, Sphere India, and of course the Institute of Social Sciences for the very warm invitation. I'd like to start by, first of all, giving a brief overview of some of the global and regional challenges we are facing, the work of the IFRC in this area, and finally on our partnership with the NDRG. As Professor Amita said quite rightly earlier before, disasters do not sleep. They also do not discriminate, and living here in Asia Pacific, we all know that we are living in the most disaster-prone region on Earth. And what we're seeing with more frequent and intense weather events, of course, exacerbated by climate change, ongoing disasters and and emerging health emergencies such as COVID-19, they all highlight why it's so crucial to have a robust disaster risk management system. Laws and policies underpin all these aspects of disaster risk management. They form the often invisible foundation of disaster risk management, protecting and preparing communities all around the world. But despite these significant strides and improvements in disaster law in recent decades, many countries still need to strengthen their laws effectively to manage the risks and impacts of disasters. What we're seeing is that legal gaps in disaster risk reduction reduce the resilience of communities to disasters. Without a strong legal framework for disaster preparedness and response, critical preparedness activities may be missed and authorities can be overwhelmed during response operations. So the result is more severe disaster impacts and delays to life-saving assistance for the people who need it most. As we are facing climate change, a pandemic, and increasingly frequent and intense disasters, the need for disaster laws is ever increasing. So the importance of domestic disaster laws, policies and plans are supported by three key international instruments: the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, the Sustainable Development Goals, and of course the Paris Agreement. The organisation I work for, the IFRC, our disaster law program, works with National Red Cross and Red Crescent societies, their governments and other partners in developing and applying state-of-the-art disaster-related legislation, policies and procedures. And we do this in order to make communities safer and to improve the protection of the most vulnerable when faced with crisis. To do this, our national societies leverage what we call their auxiliary role via their governments, especially in disaster risk management platforms and through national and local networks. And this highlights our reach into community groups. Ensuring that no one is left behind in humanitarian response or decision-making is integral to the disaster law program and really to all aspects of disaster law. So our program works actively with communities, particularly so that those who are most at risk and vulnerable are aware of their rights, their roles, and their responsibilities under disaster management arrangements, so they can use their franchise and can push for the changes that they want and they need. The IFRC has a long history working in collaboration with interested states on improving legislation related to disaster risk management and ensuring that they're well understood and well implemented. With over 95 technical assistance projects since 2007, the IFRC has been working together with national societies and are now recognised as the preferred experts in this area. We provide our advice pursuant to a mandate that's been set out by the states parties to the Geneva Conventions and the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. And this has been done in a series of resolutions that have been adopted at the International Conference of the Red Cross and Red Crescent. This is a conference that's made up of all the states parties and all the Red Cross and the Red Crescent components. And this has been since 2003. Interestingly, though, when we first started the program, we were only providing technical legal assistance and advice on one area, just on the area of facilitating international assistance into a country. But the increasing complexity of the disaster law space, the emergence of new challenges, means that we are constantly expanding our areas of focus and expertise to meet the growing demand for support. So as I mentioned, when we first started, we only looked at international assistance coming into a country. Now we provide guidance on preparedness for response, on disaster risk reduction, on gender equality and protection from sexual and gender-based violence, from planned relocation. We've got our most recent guidance on law and public health and emergency as a response to COVID. And our two most, I guess the two global pieces of working of legislation or area that we're working on now is on is due to an increasing request from governments who are having to grapple with the SDGs, the Sendai framework, the Paris Agreement, and all of the obligations under these various frameworks as to how do they then incorporate those into their disaster risk management agreements. And so that's an area that we're looking into to do some research to see what the synergies are so that we can develop some recommendations for our governments. We're also currently looking into the area of disaster recovery. So, as you can see, there really is a lot of work to be done in this area. And the thing is, we cannot do it alone. In our quest for to ensure that no one is left behind, we have adopted a whole of society approach when we're looking at legislation, and that also applies to our ways of working as well. As the IFRC, we are increasingly looking at non-traditional partners to partner with, because I guess the level of the disasters we're looking at, the level of impact and the potential for this to be so huge, I think we're realizing more and more that working in silos, working as individual organizations is no longer going to work. And we recognize that no one single entity, no one single individual or organization can do it alone. We must all work together within our relevant sectors and areas of expertise to help protect communities and to save lives. And that's why we were incredibly honoured and excited to continue our partnership with the NDRG to ensure that our collective work is evidence-based on strong, robust and quality research. Just a little bit about our working together. So the IFRC and the NDRG have enjoyed a collaborative relationship since, I think the first meeting was about in 2014 with my predecessor. And I have to say that we continue to be amazed at the high energy and enthusiasm of the group that is matched only by the high quality and standard of its research and its work. The value of organizations and networks of experts such as the NDRG, working with the Institute for Social Sciences and Sphere India, and courses such as the Foundation course on disaster management cannot be understated. They span critical topics in disaster management, such as disaster governance, disaster law, disaster economics, just to name a few, and being taught by esteemed panelists from academia, from operations and other partners. This all provides a blueprint for a vibrant, a collaborative and a dynamic course. And of course, this opens up this critical area of law and practice to the next generation. This is just the beginning, and the IFRC's Disaster Law Program looks forward to continued partnership and collaboration with you all in this very important area. I wish you all every success for this inaugural course on disaster management. Malo Alpito, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for illuminating us on the robust, work that is being done by IFRC and why a robust disaster law framework is necessary to deal with the climate change emergencies and also to build a framework which is needed for disaster risk reduction. May I now invite our Honorable Member of National Disaster Management Authority, Shri Krishna Vatsji, whose work has been instrumental in the area of disaster risk management. But before inviting me, let us just give me a brief introduction of Sir. Shri Krishna Vatsji has worked in the area of disaster risk reduction and recovery for the last 25 years. Prior to joining as member NDMA, Krishna Vatsji worked as policy advisor, disaster recovery, Bureau for Policy and Program Support, UNDP in New York and Nairobi during 2015 and 20. He served as the Regional Disaster Reduction Advisor, South and Southwest Asia in New Delhi from 2008 to 2014. He joined UNDP in 2007 as Early Recovery Coordinator in the Philippines. As a career civil servant, Krishna S. Vatsji joined the Maharashtra Emergency Earthquake Rehabilitation Program in the state of Maharashtra in 1995 and implemented a large-scale earthquake recovery program during the next 4 years. He has also served as Secretary to the Government of Maharashtra, Relief and Rehabilitation from 2003 to 6, and then as Secretary Rural Development and Panchayati Raj from 2006 to 2007. In course of his career, he extensively consulted for several national and international organizations in the area of disaster risk reduction and recovery. Sir has a Doctor of Science in Disaster Risk Management from George Washington University, Washington, D.C., and has published extensively on this subject. We are really grateful that you have taken out your precious time and you are with us here today. And over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Chugh. Thank you, Professor Amita Singh, for inviting me to this inaugural session. Very, very happy, very pleased to be here. I don't know much about the program, but I'm sure that it's an important contribution to disaster education, and it's good to share my thoughts with the participants here. I will begin my discussion with a tribute to Professor Parshuraman, who recently passed away. Parshuraman was Director, Tata Institute of Social Sciences. He was a scholar, practitioner, and a disaster management expert in many ways. He was one of the scholars who actually bridged the difference between the academia and the practice. And he was instrumental in setting up the Jamsetji Tata Center for Disaster Management at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. It was one of the first organized effort at disaster management education at the postgraduate level. I had several opportunities of interacting with Professor Parshuraman. His commitment, his erudition, scholarship was really, of the very, very high order, and I always held him in high esteem. Before he set up the Tata Institute for this Jamsetji Tata Center for Disaster Management at TISS, he had invited me to one of the events at the TISS. At that time, I was in Mumbai, and it was a discussion on, again, disaster management education. And I had suggested that it's important that disaster management education needs to be given a more definitive boundary, as the discipline is growing, as the practice area is growing. We find that it is fast becoming an open-ended subject. Anyone working in the humanitarian sector is also a disaster management expert. Someone working in the area of public health is also a disaster management expert. It's good, that the discipline is expanding itself, but somewhere its core areas need to be defined, and its entry thresholds need to be set up. And I think I'm so grateful that he listened to me, and after some time they decided to set up this program at the TISS, which became the first institutional effort at providing postgraduate education in disaster management. I work in NDMA, and as part of my work, I keep interviewing a large number of candidates for various kinds of jobs here. And that gives me a glimpse of the way disaster education is imparted in the country. We have introduced a two-stage recruitment, and at the first stage, we asked the candidates to make a presentation. And recently, I asked the candidates to make a presentation on the institutional aspects of disaster management. What are the key challenges and priorities before the country? There were 21 presentations, and none of them actually addressed the way our institutions function in the country. We have a very clear structure of disaster management institution: NDMA, SDMA, DDMA, how they function, what are the deficiencies in their functioning, what are the challenges, and what are the reforms that these institutions need. I conveyed the topic of the presentation at least 4 or 5 days ahead of the presentation. It was to be a very small presentation, 10 minutes, 10 slides. And what was very surprising is that out of 21, one could present a very succinct, I would say, enunciation of the challenges and priorities of institutional aspects of disaster management. And somewhere it evokes a lot of concern, a lot of anxiety about the state of disaster management in the country. I mean, they speak, when I ask them to speak about the institutional aspect, they speak about everything. They speak about how our early warning system has improved, how we have implemented recovery programs, how we are going about mitigation, what are the problems with our response-centric, relief-centric disaster management. But none of them could focus on the institutional aspects, and this has become a real problem of the disaster management education, that its boundaries are missing. A discipline needs to be generally very differentiated in its structure. Disaster management has several aspects. Each aspect has its own place, its own literature, its own priorities, its own pedagogy. But if you just bring in all kinds of discussion, and this is what I get to see in every webinar, every discussion, that in a discussion on disaster recovery, we start discussing preparedness. We in a discussion on mitigation, we start discussing our response, or maybe access to disaster assistance. So the boundaries are becoming very, very, I would say, slippery, and just people come and make all kinds of pronouncements. So this, I think, impedes the process of disaster management becoming a well-developed discipline. As the disaster management grew as an academic discipline all over the world, there were certain distinct trends. One was that it basically, most of the universities, most of the institutions, they started the program because some professor was interested in disaster management. So he or she took the initiative and developed the course curriculum, developed the program, got the funding. So it's basically, it was one individual enterprise or enterprise of 1 or 2 additional associates. Now, whenever such a thing happened, the academic training of that particular professor, influenced the course content. So if there is a professor in sociology and he has started a program, you would find that the disaster management education has very significant sociological content. If a geography professor has started a disaster management course, it tends to be dominated by geography. And so forth. An IT professor, decides to develop a program, you would find that most of the course would consist of GIS and all those IT applications. Not necessarily a bad thing. It is bound to happen. This would, this is how the disciplines grow, and this kind of academic growth is very much expected in the beginning. In the beginning, also a lot of courses are started. They don't have standards. They don't have literature. There is a serious dilution of quality. We can get to see that, but it always happens when a discipline grows. We need to understand that. There is no need to be too deeply concerned about some of these things. But over a period of time, it is our responsibility to standardize the discipline. It is our responsibility that we develop some kind of a purity of epistemology, a core epistemology, something that really relates to the disasters and their impacts. And this is something that for which the time has come. We really need to identify the core elements of disaster management. As I understand it, and while disaster management may have several flavors and may have several, and it's an interdisciplinary program, all the disciplines need to influence them. I completely agree. Also, disaster management is a practitioner's discipline. So it must be influenced by the practice. All this is given, all this is welcome, all this is very, very important. But at the same time, I said there should be a core element. And that core element should relate to the four things. The most important, of course, is risk. Disaster risk lies at the central place of disaster management. And we need to understand risks in all its depth. What are the drivers of risk? Who actually is exposed to risk? How the risks amplify? How the people manage their risks at the micro level, at the meso level, at the national level, and who are actually driven into poverty because they could not manage the risks. And the risks have three important elements, hazards, vulnerability, and exposure. And for a student of disaster management, it is extremely important that they understand these three constituting elements of risk. They should have a good understanding of hazards. They should know what constitutes vulnerability, what deepens vulnerability, and how the exposure is determined. So if you know some of these important elements of disaster management, you know the basics of disaster management, and then you can diversify yourself into several areas. And each area is huge, it's vast, and it's growing. It's growing on the strength of the practice. The previous speaker spoke about the international humanitarian law. It's an area, it's a huge area. But at the same time, countries have developed disaster laws on their own. And we need to differentiate between international humanitarian laws and the national laws which the governments have developed. The governments are very, very protective about their lawmaking functions. they consider that law is a sovereign area, and they would not like any external agency to influence the process of lawmaking. I have seen from outside, I have seen from inside how the governments tend to protect their lawmaking functions. So these are the finer nuances that you need to grasp, and then you need to work with this kind of understanding. And when you have this kind of understanding, you are in a better situation to influence the process of lawmaking. You also need to understand why the governments do not want to overextend themselves through laws, because sometimes they have to honor the obligations that they create through laws. So they don't want to overcome it, and that's why they are very, very, very guarded when they have an expression in the law book. So again, this comes through extensive awareness of the legal aspects of disaster management, but you need to have the core substratum of disaster management in order to grasp these aspects. So as the disaster management as a discipline is growing, we know that many more students are interested in getting the education. Many more universities are offering, at least 30 universities in India are offering education in disaster management.
Sorry, sir, you're not audible.
I think he has muted himself.
No, he's there, sir.
He's there, but somehow it has been muted.
Yeah, the screen has been freezed.
Both.
I think connectivity is poor. Ask him to switch off his video.
Can you please switch off your video?
Please call him, because he cannot be annoying.
We're just trying to connect to him. Please bear with us for some time.
Shall I?
Yeah.
Shall I continue?
Yes, sir. Now you are absolutely audible.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that we need to invest in strengthening the academic discourse, is paying greater attention to the conceptual and theoretical foundations of disaster management. That would give students a much better understanding of disaster management as it is practiced. A smattering of this, a smattering of that, this does not really help the students, and they grasp disaster management in many ways, but it's not really a very holistic understanding, a very integrated understanding of disaster management. This is a very serious deficiency in the way the universities and colleges are providing in disaster management. And this needs to be addressed. And I hope the foundation course that you are offering is a positive step in that direction, that you are providing various education in various areas, but at the same time you have an integral core at which really binds together these different aspects of disaster management. So these are some of the ideas that I wanted to share with you, and thank you very much for giving me the time to share these thoughts. And I look forward to continued dialogue with you on this issue. This is a very, very important area for laying down long-term foundation for disaster management in India. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for highlighting the limitations and the need for stressing out on why we need to identify the core areas of disaster management and strengthen the academic discourse, and thus, come up with a more robust theoretical and foundational framework of disaster management. Thank you very much, sir, for your inputs. Now we have Mr. Vikrant Mahajanji, CEO of Sphere India, who will be speaking on the role of social sector in disaster governance. Sir has been leading Sphere India's interagency process for humanitarian coordination, training and capacity building, knowledge management, and collaborative advocacy for the last 5 years. With an extensive experience of over 16 years, Sir has been working in emergencies across different states of India and South Asia for more than a decade. Prior to his direct involvement with humanitarian action since 2004, he has been a commissioned officer with Corps of Engineers, Indian Army, where he got involved in direct action during different operations, training exercises, as an aid to civil authorities during complex and humanitarian emergency situations. He has worked with various governments, corporates, UN, international organizations, NGOs, CBOs, and military, paramilitary, and security agencies. He has an interdisciplinary background in science, engineering, and public administration, training and development, and organization behavior. He also graduated in International Diploma in Humanitarian Assistance from Center for International Humanitarian Cooperation, Fordham University, New York, and United Nations System Staff College. He is a certified project management professional from Project Management Institute, USA, certified business continuity planner, and Six Sigma Black Belt for quality and process improvement. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Gaurika. Thank you, Professor Amita, the distinguished panelists. And it was really nice listening to my previous speakers, Inaugural and also Dr. Krishna Vatsa. Thanks. I think it's a very important topic, the way the entire course is organized. Thanks a lot for this. I've been asked to speak more on the role of social sector, and I think seeing the way the course is being structured here, and also the previous discussion and the social sector, how we look at the social sector maybe from academic point of view, what Krishna was emphasizing a lot, that we look at more from practitioners' point of view, and how we bridge both the academic and practice together in this discourse of looking at social sector and where its linkage is coming as a humanitarian sectors. I think that is at the more conceptual framework level. So as we may see this social sector academically coming in from social sciences pertaining to society, all related disciplines, which deals with the society and the functioning of a society. That's where, as a social sector, actually in practice we find it's a very interdisciplinary field, which looks at the sociology, anthropology, maybe economics, law, the psychology of people living in there, the organization behavior, how the organizations put into play, come into play together. At a governance level, it sees the whole of a society approach, which we saw during the COVID. One of the biggest tragedy which we all have survived and just living with those experiences. Very recent one is how the whole of society got into action together. So it's also from the disciplines, interdisciplinary approach. We look at who are the actors when we're talking about the social sector, and dealing with the disasters. Again, if we talk about actors now, so there's everybody there. I think government being the biggest, as Professor Amita said in her opening remarks also, is the government is where the prime responsibility lies, and it's the biggest enabler or the prime responsibility holder. But with the government, there is, and the government's role to look at, who are the other actors, and within government again, when we are looking at a subject as law, again, with the government, everybody have a functions. We heard that now the disaster law of the country gave us a structure as NDMA, SDMA, DDMA, but more of an executive function. There is parliament, the parliament have a role there, and I think we are working with, again, as a sphere collective, that we should be thinking of a parliamentary committee for disaster management in India. I think that's a structurally we should have that kind of a discussion in the parliament also. So there are various other parliamentary committees, and there are various through which the legislation, the laws are made for India. As Dr. Vatsa was saying, the governments, they are very conscious of their sovereignty function now, and they want to see how the laws are being made. They don't want too much interference of the outer world into it, but they also have a coherence, with the outer world when we deal with the subjects like humanitarian and disaster governance in India. I think I'll come to that one is when we talk about laws, how most of the laws in India have to be aligned with the UN conventions and the international laws, India being signatory to it. India being signatory to the International Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, India being signatory to the Paris Agreement, to the other UN convention. Many of them, maybe some of them we have already signed, and some of them which fall into the purview of it, maybe the International Refugee Law, we have yet not signed it, but India has its own tradition and history of dealing with refugees over the years, and we from our own experience, how we inform the international processes through these experiences, through our legislation is, so it's not just the executive function, it's a very much a legislative function, and we look at the legislative function, if not the central laws, but the state laws, the disaster management being the state subject. So, when many states, have got their own state law, and then moving down, yes, more is required at a very, very local levels. The experiences and learning from recent COVID needs that there's more and more decentralized governance going down, absolutely cutting edge level we need to have, and those structures need to come up. So this government being the one prime actor is not, but then is whether the space which we look at in this space is various other non-government actors. There are businesses, there are corporates, now corporates under the corporate social responsibility, another legal framework. There's a huge contribution being made, and we saw what a kind of contribution they can make in a situation, we've seen in the COVID recent context. But beyond the corporates, there is a very rich, we have a social sector, as we could nearly call a civil society actors, again, into various right from the very most community-based organizations, communities themselves, how the communities organizes and they cope with it. But then we have got the NGOs, a very, very grassroots level functionary organization, but there are also the bigger NGOs, working with lot of specialized technical capacities, and then there's the international organizations. Then we see the Red Cross out there. There's a UN. All of these kind of actors are what we see in this space, and they all have a role. But the role is primarily each one of them may pick up a role as per their mandate and specializations, but their role primarily remain is to complement and supplement the government action, who remains the prime in this the work for disaster response or disaster management. Now it's when we're looking at the social sector more from practice point of view, And where I come from, my experience is more, I would like to speak about the humanitarian part of it, where we see the social sector becomes the social services and the services which become absolutely critical, in the aftermath of disaster. And if we go back to the legal framework behind it, maybe the most fundamental guiding principle is right to life. And now right to life is again, you find its reference whether in the international laws where its origin is, it's a universal thing. It's a pillar of our constitution also. Article 21 talks about right to life. But I think when we as in the humanitarian sector, if I'm referring to Sphere and others, when we started to also, I think is various judicial interpretations of the right to life, in its practice in India, it's always right to life with dignity. It's not just about, right to life. I think the government has an obligation to ensure that people's life is secured, but it's also with dignity. And that's where the component of dignity comes in, is how do we see what is this dignity is all about, and more so is, in the aftermath of a disaster. So to preserve a life, if a fund is our responsibility as social actors, including the government and everybody. What is it that's lead to life become getting at a risk in a post-disaster situation is one, apart from the immediate rescue and other thing. What we see is immediate aftermath of disaster, people's coping mechanisms get disturbed. So there are issues related to water, availability of water, sanitation, hygiene, their food and nutrition, where they're going to be accommodated, shelter, their shelters, and then, how all these three things affect their health and the health services. COVID was primarily, if it started as a health pandemic first, but it became a food crisis when the migrant population started, exodus started happening and then it led to many other secondary issues to say there. So that's what the interdisciplinary thing comes up, and these essential services, which are very important to secure life in the aftermath of disasters, we see them as the humanitarian sectors. And then I come back to, saying not about right to life, but it's with dignity. So with dignity means what? It absolutely need to think about in terms of minimum quantity and quality of these services, which needed to be provisioned, without which the life cannot be secured. And it should be in a way which is dignified for the people at the recipient level. So that's where when we say it is with dignity and what's the minimum quantity and quality of these services which should be maintained. That's where we get into a discussion about minimum standards and minimum standards for disaster response. And that's where is the Sphere and the Sphere global standards. Maybe it's again a global standards. It comes up if there is, but as most of us refers to it, but it's the universal standards. It's a universal needs. For example, when we say everybody should have access to safe and sufficient quality of a safe drinking water post disaster, it will not vary for people in India or people anywhere else. The indicator to it may vary. It could mean, for water in deserts and, the areas where communities are very culturally conscious of preserving water, they can survive in 7 liters per person per day. But the people living in floodplains of India who have no culture of preserving water, even they don't have taps, the water keeps flowing from the taps also. That's what we see in many villages is even 15 liters per person per day will fall short. So we need to look at the standard is one. We need to look at the contextualizations in the local context, where which community we are looking about, what is their cultural practices, and what will be the minimum standard, but it will be an indicator of the minimum standard there. And that's what we need to look at from a practical point of view when we are applying the law and legal framework in practice in the local context of a disaster. It's not about response. It's also about what Dr. Vatsa was talking about, risk. Now, in these same sectors, our services which we develop are at the risk because of, again, various hazard, geoclimatic or social vulnerability profile we have in our country. Most of these services are at risk. So how do we look at these services remain resilient during disaster so that they don't get affected, or if they get affected, they quickly fall back, right? So that's the whole discussion about resilience, and the resilience comes up from mainstreaming the disaster risk reduction into these sectors, and also the climate change adaptation to these sectors. And that's together we pull up a debate on the resilience. I think resilience itself is required a big discussion in itself, how we deal with these risks, minimize this risk, we build back better, and we build a culture of safety and preparedness among the communities so that we reduce the impact of disaster in itself on first to us. So that's the discussion which takes us to. I think coming to the back to the actors, the services, and the background of it, to the role of various actors. I think I've already mentioned about the government as the prime responsibility. The prime, has responsibility to see that all these functions are done. But the government alone cannot do it, especially in time of disaster. It's required, but we see it's during the COVID time, it required, or what we're seeing in Pakistan now, the floods, the magnitude of whole floods over there. It need the effort and support from everybody else. And that's where is the humanitarian space, humanitarian part of intervention, where we say that it's more about the complementarity of the roles of all actors to work with the government in together. But the learning also is, it's a time which requires a lot of investment, and a lot of importance is there for the interagency coordination, for the coordination between different actors and all. I think that's become a big issue during these situations. And I'm glad to see, and I want to actually congratulate, the team of NDMA, that our National Disaster Plan 2019 is, I think, the first plan which I'm seeing is giving such an importance to the interagency coordination. It's mainstreamed across the chapters, the entire one. So has been one of the key area of concern, that we need to look at a better coordination between various actors. We need to look at better coordination between the government, various levels of government. We need to have a better coordination between GO and government and the NGO, and now all of that together is there. So that's the other aspect of it. And coming back, I think, is to the legal framework which underpins all these developments, maybe coming from the international law, be it starting from the human rights law, right? That's where the right to life come with it, or the international humanitarian law, which is entirely a different, branch when it comes to say it's a law which comes into play where we are looking at the conflict and the situations like this. It put boundaries on the conflicting parties so that the people, who may be at the interface of this conflict but not part of the conflict, it's putting the limitation on the warring parties so that those affected people who get caught up in the conflict, they can be their life and their support can be secured. And then there is also the legal regime. There's a refugee law, international refugee law, but there is also, that's where maybe in India we need to have look at how we are having our own legal provisions. We are all looking at our own practice and history and tradition, which is the source of law actually, is how it's evolving in India. There are a whole lot of UN conventions. Many of them India is signatory to it. The conventions looking at gender aspect, convention looking at for the children, for disabled, all these aspects where we're talking about the most vulnerable in the community, their interest. We need to look at the first as the principle which guide us, that the most urgent need of the most vulnerables need to be prioritized first. So we need to look at those. And in our social structures, if we're talking about a social structure, our social structure has been historically like that we have a segment of populations, they're invisibles in our society who needed to be focused especially, and there are others who get marginalized, because of social structure and the way our society gets structured. We need to see that they don't remain marginalized in the entire planning and management of disaster services. Rather, our effort should be to prioritize them first, right, and then move on. So all these things, all these aspects which we touch about social sector, I think is a huge topic in itself, but many aspects of it's being covered in the course, the way I've seen the structure of the course. And I think it's going to be very interesting next 5 days with all of you, who are taking up time to go to this. I wish you all good luck and good discussion, good learning. And I will also convey my thanks once again to, Professor Amita Singh, Dr. Gorika, Nivedita ma'am. Yes, I think we should continue to collaborate and develop these kind of programs, which are very, very important. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. It was really lovely listening to you and for highlighting, for bringing out what is the role played by social sector in disaster risk reduction. We may now move to Dr. Josh Matthew, who will be sharing his insights with us on what is the role of panchayats and community mobilization in disaster management. Dr. George Matthew was the founding director and currently the chairman of the Institute of Social Sciences. He received his PhD in sociology from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He was visiting fellow of the University of Chicago South Asian Studies Center and visiting professor, University of Padova, and was also awarded the Fulbright Fellowship in summer 1991 for working at the University of Chicago. He is a member of several committees of the federal government and on the board of governors of national and international organizations. He has practiced and presented in international conferences on political process, democracy, federalism, human rights, religion, and society. He is currently specializing on the local government system, decentralization, and gender equity. Over to you, sir. So you'll have to unmute yourself.
Hello, you can
Yes,
hear
sir.
me?
Yes, we can hear you.
This is a very proud movement in my life, in my career in the Institute of Social Sciences. Very, very special thanks to Amita Singh for taking this initiative to take forward this whole issue which we were discussing about disaster management. And when we were deliberating on this subject, she was very keen that the role of local governments must come to the forefront. In fact, we had very knowledgeable presentations, very illustrative, very good. And all this, if there is a will, there is a way. That is very important. So the governments and other organizations who are working should take up all these suggestions and recommendations. In this context, I was very keen how we are today using the capacity of the local governments. The local governments are, of course, at the village level, rural, the panchayats, and in the urban areas, the municipalities. What are their roles and how we are using their capacity? And I would like to say a few words today, highlighting what the state of Kerala has done in this respect. See, Kerala has a population of 3.46 crores, but this population is geographically situated in a natural disaster area. How? Between 590 kilometers coastal area and 4,050 kilometers on the eastern side with hills and mountains. We call it Western Ghats. And today, when the climate change is a reality, the Kerala is, I may use the word, victim of this climate change. Now, what are these? Not just one disaster in one way. Cyclones, floods, landslides, and that is the natural disasters. And then epidemics. At one time, we had Nipah and COVID-19. But how the people of Kerala resisted it, and that was through the local governments, the panchayats. And here I would like to say that Nipah, which this virus, deadly pandemic caused by the Nipah virus, it transmitted from animals and birds in Kozhikode and Malappuram area in the northern part of Kerala. But the panchayats with awareness contained it very fast. And in 2019, Kerala had the worst flood calamity. More than 120 people lost their lives. 1,780 houses collapsed in northern Kerala. And this was handled or arrested or saved the people through the work of the panchayats. Now, let me say a word about the panchayats in Kerala. This is not just panchayats after 1993, the 73rd Constitution Amendment. The panchayats had its roots much earlier. I must say from 1958 onwards. There was a new Panchayat Act in Kerala. From there, the village panchayats, the district the block panchayats and the district panchayats came. And nearly 150 subjects have been transferred from the state to the districts. Therefore, they are the district governments. And so Kerala is a federation of districts. And even in 1991, they were very strong local governments. And the Kerala had a People's Plan campaign in 1996. That campaign gave the idea of panchayats to the people at the village level. So panchayats are working from the neighborhood groups, then the ward, and then the panchayats and the councils. And every panchayat in Kerala has a hospital, primary health center. These primary health centers have doctors, they have other medical facilities, and these primary health centers, which is enacted in the Constitution of India, 73rd Constitution Amendment, is functioning extremely well. Let me quote American sociologist Patrick Heller. Nowhere in India are local governments as resourced and as capable as in Kerala. Whether in focalizing containment efforts in hotspots, tracking down those who have been exposed, or managing the broad array of direct benefits that have been distributed to migrant workers, the elderly and differently able, the key has been the capacity of the state actors and civil society partners to coordinate their efforts at the level of panchayats, district and municipalities. So this has laid the strong foundation in Kerala, and this has really helped the system in the state. And nationally and internationally, this is acknowledged. Now, it may be mentioned here that only in Kerala, all panchayats have these facilities. I have studied several states, but these primary health centers or sub-centers or other well-equipped health system is not existing. This has happened because of local government and panchayats. Now, there are many other innovative measures like Kudumbashri, and these neighborhood groups will help all these situations also. Now, according to a field report, Kerala COVID fight starts bottom up. Panchayats lead the way. For the hard-pressed state government officials say, the active support of the local bodies has come as a big boost. This is said by the, this is recorded by the officials. Officials cannot do everything. It is the people. On the ground, leading the fights are the panchayats. And today, I would like to emphasize, underline the fact that on the ground, we need active people, enlightened people, resources, and equipments. That is done by the panchayats. Can we go forward and show this to the rest of the country in other states? How we can do it? It needs a lot of effort. And I hope that this will be an opening, and we are all with you, and all our human resources and other knowledge and everything is available. And we have to say that we shall overcome. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for bringing out the case study of Kerala and the role of panchayats and community mobilization in shaping this, in shaping the framework of disaster risk reduction. Now we have Dr. Nivedita Haran ma'am, who will be sharing with us the role of district administration in disaster governance. Dr. Nivedita Haran ma'am graduated with economics and philosophy honors, obtained master's in philosophy from Jadavpur University, and PhD in sociology from IIT Delhi. She joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1980 and worked in the state of Kerala and in Government of India in various departments that include departments of land revenue, disaster management, agriculture, industries, labor and employment, planning and home, apart from serving as district collector and district magistrate. She was director and later joint secretary in Ministry of Urban Development, Government of India. She was on deputation to the UN peacekeeping mission in Kosovo for 5 years. Post-retirement, she has been engaged in activities related to research and academics in the areas of disaster resilience building, good governance, digitization of land records, labor and migration issues, and management of water, wastewater, and solid waste. She is a member of the court-appointed Committee of Experts for Cleaning Up and Conservation of the Dal Lake and the committee related to modernization of land records in Delhi. She is also the chairperson of the Center for Migration and Inclusive Development and Ente Bhumi Trust. She has been a regular speaker at various training institutes, including the Civil Services Training Academy at Mussoorie. I hand it over to you, ma'am, to please share with us your insights on the role of district administration in disaster governance, and also to please sum up the deliberations that we had today in our inaugural session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Gaurika. Thank you very much. Although you could cut down on my introduction a bit. I start by congratulating the NDRG team. I think the idea to hold a foundation course is a brilliant idea. And I believe that being the first course, I think a lot of good suggestions are going to come out of it, and a lot of good experiences are going to come out of it, which I think we should, and I'm sure we will take note of. Now, for those who are listening today, especially those who are registered for the course, let me summarize as to what we heard until now for the last 1.5 hours, and what I believe will be happening and what you will be learning in the course of the next 5 days. When you look at anything connected with disaster management, I think they fall within any of these 3 categories. It could be in the form of a framework. So whether it is the institutional framework that exists in our country, starting with the NDMA down up to the DDMAs and the panchayat level authorities that are there, or the legal framework, the law that we have, etc. So this is basically the framework within which anything connected with disaster management happens. And this includes the policies, the programs, etc., etc. The second part of it is I would say the aspect of it is the application part of it. There is a lot of research going on and a lot of work going on in the field, for instance, for making our buildings safer, our infrastructure safer, making our cities safer, reducing the number of traffic accidents. These are all application of disaster management activities, the acts, the framework, the policies, etc. And the third aspect, a very important aspect, is generating awareness or capacity building, which involves everyone. So while the first is mostly the role of the government, and the second is mostly the role of the non-governmental agencies, the third includes not only the students, but also the general public. Everyone is part of capacity building. Now, when you look at it in this manner, you realize that in a course on disaster management, there is a risk of getting a bit dispersed. As Dr. Krishna Vatsa was mentioning, there is always the risk that everything falls within it. After all, disaster is a part of our lives, and therefore everything does fall in it. But when you study a subject as disaster management, we have to make sure that we are more focused. So whether it is interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, or focused, we have to make sure that we always ask the question as to which of these 3 areas are we looking at. Now, I like the idea when Dr. Amita started with the 5 pillars of disaster management. And I think the first one is extremely important. I believe that if the first one is embedded in all our minds, a lot of the disasters would not happen. So the concept of public trust, the public trust doctrine that is contained in the Apex Court orders referring to how every government servant's duty is to ensure that all public assets are used and held for future generations. You see, that kind of an idea, that concept has to be drilled into all of us. And I say this because, and here I want to link with what Finau mentioned, what Krishna Vatsa mentioned about the need to ensure that we reduce risk of disasters, and that risk can be reduced only when you build capacity and when you ensure that we make it a part of our lives. You see, disaster management is a subject which just cannot be taught in classrooms alone. Of course, you have to understand the laws and the policies and acts, but you also have to go out and see and understand, for instance, how is it that disaster management or where is it that disaster management and climate change interject? Where do they cross each other? Are there linkages? Is it true that because of more disasters are happening because there is a climate change? These are ideas and concepts that all of you would understand when you get practical examples and you understand it. And I'm sure a course like this would go into all this. And I think it is also important, while it is important to say that our local bodies are important, I think there's no gainsaying the fact that every level is important. It's not just, you see, it's only when NDMA lays down the policies that the policies are actually adopted or adapted by the states, that the policy becomes policy. And then when it goes down to the districts, and as a district collector, when I ensure that that is actually relevant and relevant for my district, that the disaster management policy becomes actually applicable. So therefore, if it's a coastal district, the disaster management policy for that district would be different from a district which has no coastline. A district which is on the foothills of the Himalayas would have a plan and a policy which is totally different from what it would be in a place like Rajasthan, which has problems of water salinity, etc. So you see, we have to look at things not only holistically, but we also have to look at things in a very, very focused manner. And that can be difficult. But while it can be difficult, I think that's what makes disaster management so interesting and so challenging. And I have to conclude by mentioning that this is probably an opportunity for the NDRG team to look at the entire gamut of the epistemology of disaster management followed in these 30 universities. Are they doing it in the same manner? Are they doing something different? Are they lacking in something? And there could not be a better time than now to do it, because the Disaster Management Act is now about 17 years old. And before it becomes 20 and it becomes a full-fledged grown-up law, let's make sure that we fill up the gaps. We make sure that what we understand by disaster management conceptually are same all over. And we also make sure that disaster management, the problems that exist and that are cropping up, for instance, the problem of urban flooding. And I would not be averse to saying that let's take up the next year to ensure that there is no urban flooding in our country, in any of our cities ever over the next 1 year. And further, let's make sure that over the 1 year we can treat this problem, we can face this problem and make it deal with it in a manner that it doesn't keep recurring every year. I think these are ideas and these are concepts that are very important, that are close to us. It hits all of us, and therefore a foundation course of this nature is going to impinge on the lives of all. And therefore, those who are going to participate in it, I think, are going to go away wiser, but that should not be the end of it. You have to make sure that you adopt it and make it a part of your lives. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thanks once again.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an insightful, your insightful inputs, and for bringing out what we'll be doing in the couple of days in this foundation course. So before we end today's program, because we have some time left. So if any participant wants to share something, or if any participant has any concern about the foundation course or any question, pertaining to the course, please, this platform is free. So just share your concerns with us. Feel free to share your concerns with us. Any one of you.
Hi, ma'am. Can I say something?
Please. Please.
Yeah, hi. This is Dr. Manasvi. I'm from DME Noida, and my colleagues are also here. I was just, I'm looking forward to all the sessions. I went through your schedule, and we just hope that because we are from media school, so we are expecting something from the perspective of media students, what we can, communication for change and all sort of things which, might be covered in the coming sessions. So I just want to thank you. And we hope that in coming sessions, we'll be more enlightened and we'll have a lot of good discussions and deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Manasvi. Anybody else?
We have international scholars from Bangladesh. If they have anything to say that we can incorporate in the foundation course, concerns related to, because Bangladesh is doing very well as far as the panchayat level work is concerned, even the local courts. So if there's anything that we need to get involved with in kind of a mutual learning, which can be passed on to others in different other disciplines also. Professor Ikramul, in case you have anything to say, we would like to hear you. So, okay, till Professor Ikramul returns, let me just share here with you an extremely important point that was made by Professor George Matthew about the panchayats. There is, his great love for Kerala. Of course, he was focused on Kerala, but that is something that we need to learn from. How the panchayats have been in the forefront in handling situations. They are not, like like ones on the receiving end, that unless the aid comes in, then we need to act. So they are in the process of generating a lot of help amongst themselves, which includes education, which includes medical assistance, which includes transportation, and also communication. So that's the area which combines various aspects of the foundation course, from resources to mass media to governance. These three things just combine so effectively at the panchayat level. Of course, this is our online course because after COVID, we have been very cautiously coming forward and reaching out to people. But in coming times, we really need to go out, in our outreach processes, to many of these peripheral states which are in the forefront of disasters. And these states have recurring problems which are exacerbated because of the coming of the climate change. So how much is the climate change? How much is it man-made? This is something that need to be discussed, but also to be brought out in the media in a manner that it's not sensationalized, but it's also intellectualized, so that the discipline of disaster management is taken forward. So huge role for mass media and the panchayats I see on the two different ends. So this is what we are going to take. On the other side, that we are trying to take in the foundation courses, that on one side we have the national governments, on the other side we have regional and international governance, the United Nations. Even though the national governments may say that we have our sovereign sphere of making our own law ourselves, but this is absolutely not possible in times of today, because anything which is done is being done because there is an international law and international treaties are accepted. Parliament brings it down, incorporates into our various acts. Disaster Law Act, Disaster Management Act has come through because of that, and so many other things. So that aspect also need to be discussed. Just one interjection.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So now we have come to the end of the program, and on behalf of NDRG, on behalf of Sphere India and ISS, it gives me immense, pleasure to share to thank our honorable guests and speakers, who have been with us here today. My special, thanks to Finao, Dr. Krishna Vatsji, Vikrant Mahajanji, Dr. George Matthew, Dr. Nivedita Haran ma'am, for taking out their valuable time and being so generous and so kind, in accepting our invitation at such a short notice and being with us here today. I mean, our collaboration and the work which we have been doing in disaster management has to go miles and miles from here. This is just the beginning, and it has to move forward from here. So thank you so very much for being with us here today. Before we end today's session, I would just like to thank all our participants who have joined from across the length and breadth of the country, right? From Jammu and Kashmir to Kerala, to Gujarat in the west and to the northeast. Everyone has been, participating in this discourse on the foundation course on disaster management. So thanks to all the participants for joining this course. Yeah, yes, ma'am, you want to say something?
Before you close it down, since we have time, can we have some end remarks from the speakers if they wish to say anything missed out? If they wish to convey what we can grow and look forward to in the foundation course, now that the situation is, on the platform. So any end remarks coming from the speakers?
If you don't mind, I might take this opportunity now before anyone's had a chance to speak, just to thank you all for this opportunity. And I really enjoyed having the opportunity, particularly to hear about the course content coming up and the various components of it. And I think it's going to be an incredible session. I wish that I could register and also take part. I just think that the opportunity to learn, for collaboration, to share across the various different components, I think it's remarkable, and it provides a great platform for learning. And if this is the inaugural one, then imagine what's going to happen in the years to come when you continue to build on this. So I really want to congratulate you for taking such a proactive initiative and to putting this together, and really just want to say thank you, and thank you for allowing us to be a very tiny small part of this. But thank you, and wishing you all the best.
Thank you so much. We are so grateful to you that you could join us today.
Gorika, may I answer Dr. Mansavi's concern? Gorika?
Yes, ma'am.
May I answer Dr. Mansavi?
Sure, please, ma'am, please.
Hello, Mansavi and the entire DME team, because the whole team happens to be the participants for this course. So I would like to tell you that one full day is being devoted to communication and mass media. So what we're going to look at is the role and scope of communication and independent media in disaster management, how the governments have been using or should be using media as a partner in disaster management. And also very specifically, we'll be talking about how the schools of journalism and mass communication can incorporate the teaching of disaster management so that we're able to not only introduce the conceptual framework, but also sensitize the students when they become journalists or communicators. And in that, on that day, we have not only a communication person, but also a person from the government and also a person who has been handling communication in disaster situations. Hopefully, it will be a great learning for the students and the faculty of mass communication. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jayashree, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. We are looking forward to such sessions. Thank you.
Same here. Thank you.
So before we close down our today's inaugural session, I've just a short announcement to make. Tomorrow, we have a very important session. We have two very eminent speakers from Dhaka University, Professor Sumaya Kher and Professor Ikramul Haq, and also Professor Amita Singh would be here, who would be discussing on the aspects of disaster law. So please do join us tomorrow, same time from 4:30 to 6:30. So thank you very much. Thanks to all the participants, our honorable speaker, honorable guest, everyone. Thanks for being with us here today. So that's all for all.
Could
Thank
you tell Gorika, all of everybody to show their faces so that you can click as you always do?
Sure. Yeah, please. I would request all the participants, to please, just switch on their video for a moment so that we can please take a screenshot of everyone. Yes. Still some of them haven't, switched on their video. Please, I request everyone to please switch on their video.
That's for records.
Yeah, everyone, please, before we end the session. Just a second. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.